After the 9th month, the marrow is the only source for hematological cells. As we see in this flow chart, the hematological stem cell first commits itself into the erythropoiesis from hematopoiesis. And then this is a common myeloid progenitor, which again splits into granulocyte, monocyte progenitor, and myeloid, megakaryocyte and erythroid progenitor. It gives rise to colony forming unit megakaryocyte and blast forming unit erythrocyte. Blast forming unit erythrocytes onwards start the actual process of erythropoiesis. As we know, erythropoietin stimulates erythropoiesis, but the most susceptible or erythropoietin strongly acts on proerythroblast to colony forming unit stage. Before this, the hematopoietic stem cells are not sensitive to erythropoietin. And as we see, the nucleus will be extruded and the RBC only has hemoglobin. That's why we hello. Hello.
கேக்குது சந்திரமௌலி, சொல்லுங்க.
Okay. So coming to definition, anemia, as we all have studied, is a decrease in oxygen carrying capacity of blood. The oxygen carrying capacity of blood indicates insufficient RBC mass. It is the RBC mass we are talking about, and not the plasma, and not the blood volume as such. Usually we define anemia by using either hemoglobin, hematocrit, or RBC concentration. We rarely use RBC concentration to define anemia. We most commonly use hematocrit and hemoglobin. In the hematanalyzer, we are using RBC concentration, hemoglobin concentration, and MCV are calculated or derived or measured directly. And using these values, MCH, hematocrit, and MCHC will be calculated. WHO defines the lower limit of anemia for at sea level for women to be 12 and for men to be 13. This is based on worldwide statistics, excluding iron deficiency anemia and thalassemia. So it is not exact. As I said, insufficient RBC mass and not the plasma cell volume, because there are some conditions with discordance between hemoglobin concentration and red cell mass. For example, as we all know, in pregnancy, both RBC volume, plasma volume, and RBC, the total RBC mass both increases, but in a disproportionate manner. Hence, hemoglobin will be disproportionately low. The same occurs in congestive splenomegaly as well as in recumbency versus upright. For example, if you take a blood sample and measure the patient upright, we ask him to lie down and then measure again after 15 minutes to 1 hour, the hematocrit can drop up to almost 7%. We all know one packed cell will increase hematocrit by 3%. So almost it is equivalent to one packed cell reduce in hemoglobin concentration. And similarly, in dehydration, diarrhea, and other burns patients, there will be decrease in plasma volume related to RBC mass. Hence, the hemoglobin or hematocrit will be high. So, if we see a patient with a high hematocrit, it might suggest the patient is dehydrated. And this is another important chart. As this shows, at birth the hemoglobin in MCV will be high, but after birth, because of physiological anemia of infancy and childhood, we can see the hemoglobin drops and then picks up after puberty. The same happens to MCV. It drops and then picks up after puberty. So till 15 to 18 years of age, the normal MCV is 75 to 90, not 80 to 95 or 80 to 100 as we see in adults. This is one point to be remembered. And the limitations for using hemoglobin and hematocrit to define anemia are the following. Hemoglobin anemia, as we already saw, it reflects altered plasma volume, not a change in RBC mass. And the another stuff is hemoglobin and hematocrit may change when the underlying physiological condition is abnormal. For example, a patient living at higher altitude, or a patient with underlying hypoxic conditions, for example, cardiovascular pulmonary conditions, his hematocrit or hemoglobin might be actually increased. So in that case, a normal hemoglobin of 12 to 14 or 12 to 15 might in fact be an anemia in that patient. And some abnormal hemoglobin variants have altered affinity to hemoglobin. For example, hemoglobin Kansas has a low affinity to hemoglobin, and so the hemoglobin will be low while you are measuring. But functional definition of anemia, that is the oxygen carrying capacity of blood will be in fact normal. So the decrease in hemoglobin, that doesn't mean the patient has anemia. Acute blood loss is another example. As we all know, after blood loss, the first response is vasoconstriction. So there won't be a drop in hematocrit. Only after 6 hours, and it takes up to 3 days to peak. After that, only we may find a drop in hematocrit or hemoglobin. And the last one is in thalassemia, there is a partial synthesis of impaired partial synthesis of one globin chain. Hence, there will be a low hemoglobin, but the RBC is produced, so the RBC count will be high. If we are taking into account the RBC concentration, it might seem like erythrocytosis. But if we take into the hemoglobin concentration, it will give anemia. That is why RBC concentration is not usually used for defining anemia. And since the entire chapter on anemia relies on the lab investigation, just a bit on automated hemoanalyzer. It works on the principle of Coulter principle. Coulter principle is nothing but the hemoanalyzer, we can imagine it to be a circuit. Circuit has a voltage passing as a current, resistance, and anode cathode. This is the electrical anode and cathode. This is the current passing here. The blood we are giving, the particles will pass in between the two, in the sense like a resistance. So the change in impedance caused because of the RBC particle is how we are measuring the how the machine is giving us the values. For example, if 10 particles go, the impedance caused by each particle will be the size of the particle, and the number of impedances caused will be the number of particles crossed. That is what is given. A change in impedance that is directly proportional to the volume of the particle. For example, as we all know, neutrophils are the largest. So when the neutrophil goes through this, it will cause a higher impedance than a platelet. Platelet has a smaller volume. And as I said, there are two more things which we usually neglect in the CBC complete blood count report. One is the histogram, another is the scatter plot. Histogram actually depicts how the automated hemoanalysis is functioning. As I said, based on the volume, the histogram depicts volume and the percentage of relative percentage of occurrence. The volume is given in the x-axis, and the relative percentage of occurrence is given in the y-axis. For example, let's take into account the RBC. We all know the normal MCV is around 80 to 100. So this is 100, this is 80. Like a normal distribution curve, it shows all the particles in the blood sample we are testing. How are the particles distributed? The normal distribution should be a Gaussian curve. That's a bell-shaped curve. Here the peak is the mean. Mean is taken as the MCV. It comes to around 80 to 100. So this is normal. When coming to platelets, it is around 8 to 12 actually. So if you actually take the mean, it will come to around 8. For WBC, we might have seen in the CBC chart, it will be written as neutrophil, lymphocyte, and mixed. Why it is written like that in the sense, lymphocytes has a lower femtoliter, lower volume, around 50 to 100, 50 to 150. Mixed eosinophils, basophils, and the monocytes comes in 150 to 300. More than 300, we have the neutrophils. That's why, because it works on the Coulter principle, the analyzer is giving us values in this format. This might be helpful because, for example, if you see the RBC histogram, this is normal. If the curve is shifted to the right, it means the cells are increased in size. In the sense, the cells are macrocytic. If the curve is shifted to the left, that means the cells are smaller. That is, the cells are microcytic. And for example, if the curve has two peaks, one in the microcytic range and the one in the macrocytic range, we can easily identify that it's a dimorphic anemia without the help of peripheral smear. And some platelet disorders will have microplatelets, and some will have giant platelets. This depicts the same. Another thing is scatter plot. Scatter plot depends on the size of the. This is usually used only for WBCs. This depends on the size and the granularity. As we all know, neutrophils and basophils have more granularity. This is the x-axis. X-axis denotes the granularity. So neutrophils, basophils, and monocytes which are having granular will be on the far right. The y-axis denotes the fluorescence. Fluorescence in the sense the size of the WBCs. As we all know, the atypical lymphocytes and lymphoblasts will be higher in volume, so they will come in the top corner. Using this, we can. It is not precise, but we can identify some hematological malignancies. For example, this is image from an actual patient. This is the RBC histogram. The mean RBC volume comes to around 70, and as comes to around 80. And as we see, the MCV is 87, and the mean platelet comes around 6.8. So this is around 7. The mean platelet volume is given as 6.7, and this is the scatter plot. This is normal. As the neutrophils and neutrophils are being more granular, we are seeing the bottom right. We are seeing the granularity. Coming into the signs and symptoms, the signs and symptoms depend on magnitude, rate of fall, and the presence of compensatory factors. Compensatory factors in the sense the adaptation of the body to decrease in hemoglobin, like tachycardia, like decrease in peripheral resistance, and so on. Pallor. Pallor is not equal to anemia as such, because pallor can be seen in other conditions such as shock, acute LV failure, hypothyroidism, Addison's, and vasovagal attack. Okay. Coming to the signs, a patient with anemia might have skin and mucosal changes, that is thinning, loss of luster, and early graying of hair. Early graying of hair may be the first sign of pernicious anemia in older women. Some chronic hemolytic anemias may cause leg ulcers. Glossitis, as we all know, it is a sign of vitamin B12 deficiency. Brittle nails can occur, and fissuring at the corner of mouth is also characteristic. Coming on to neuromuscular features, headache, vertigo, tinnitus, and other things can happen. It is most common in megaloblastic anemia. Coming to GAT, atrophy of fat play, and even dysphagia can occur. Ophthalmologic manifestations in the presence of by the finding of flame-shaped hemorrhage, hard exudate, cotton wool spots, and even papilledema can occur in spite of the absence of thrombocytopenia. That explains the hemorrhages are not due to thrombocytopenia, but or in fact due to anemia. Coming to history and examination, first, as we all know, history and examination takes the upper hand before interpreting any investigation. First, we should ask about the temporal evolution, that is the onset duration, whether he had any history of trauma, and family history is important. Occupational customs and habits, hobbies, travel history, drug history, dietary habits. Dietary habits are very important because iron deficiency anemia is the most common anemia in developing countries, including India. Next, we should ask about the signs and symptoms of anemia. As I said, if the anemia is well compensated, for example, in hereditary spherocytosis, which is going on for a long amount of time, the patient will be asymptomatic. The hemoglobin might be 6 or 7, but the patient will be patients will be asymptomatic. But a patient with a drastic drop in hemoglobin, for example, following injury, might present with giddiness and postural hypertension. Scleral icterus can give a clue to hemolysis. Hepatosplenomegaly, lymphadenopathy, sternal tenderness can indicate underlying malignancy. Depending on the color of pallor, they have given some characteristic to each type of anemia, but this is difficult to identify. To identify anemia, we actually need 3 factors. One is the pigmentation of the skin. If the skin is hyperpigmented, as in manual labor workers, it is very difficult to identify anemia using hands. Usually, we identify anemia in the conjunctiva and the buccal mucosa. When the hemoglobin drops below 7 or 6, the skin creases will be won't be dark when compared to the surrounding palm. Coming to the investigations, we usually do a CBC, and based on the need, we will do iron study and marrow aspiration. There are around 8 or 9 key questions to ask in every patient with anemia. Is anemia associated with other hematological abnormalities? Because if it is associated with other lineage abnormalities, for example, leukopenia or pancytopenia, then bone marrow might be the underlying problem. There's some problem within the bone marrow. Then we should ask if there is an appropriate reticulocyte response to anemia, because the natural physiological process in response to anemia should be an hyperactive bone marrow that we can measure by using reticulocyte. If the anemia is associated with reticulocytosis, is there any evidence for hemolysis? And then if there is a less than appropriate reticulocyte response, we should look at the red cell indices. And based on that, we should go in favor of microcytic, or normocytic. And then we should see if the anemia is associated with populations of different red cell sizes, that is anerythrocytosis. We see that in the form of RDW, red cell distribution width. It usually we see in iron deficiency anemia, but it can also happen in megaloblastic anemia. Is the anemia associated with abnormalities seen on blood smear? That might help us to narrow down the diagnosis. And finally, we should see if a bone marrow examination is, if at all, necessary. This is the basic approach. What I've said is that if anemia is associated with other hematological abnormalities, then we have to go in for bone marrow examination. If not, then we should look at the reticulocyte response. If there is adequate reticulocyte response, then we should see evidence for we should look at the evidence for hemolysis in the form of increased bilirubin, increased LDH, decreased haptoglobin, and hemocysteine in urine. If they are present, it goes in favor of hemolysis. If they are not present, then we should evaluate for hemorrhagic causes. If there is if the reticulocyte response is decreased, then we should look at the blood cell indices. The normal is 80 to 100, which is normocytic. More than 100 is macrocytic. Less than 80 is microcytic. I have been saying about the reticulocyte count because it forms a major, as we all see in this flow chart. The reticulocyte count is the only appropriate platform for differentiating anemia, not based on the red cell indices. For calculating reticulocyte count, we in the peripheral smear, reticulocyte count is usually measured using supravital stains like new methylene blue, crystal violet, etc. They will give it as a percentage. Normal is 0.5 to 1.5, but the percentage is of no value. We should first look at the reticulocyte count. That is given in percentage. And next we should calculate the corrected reticulocyte count. That is percentage of reticulocyte into patient's hematocrit divided by 45. 45 is being taken as a normal. This we are doing because an anemic patient, a normal patient having a reticulocyte response of reticulocyte percentage of 1, and an anemic patient having a reticulocyte percentage of 1 is different. Because in an anemic patient, we expect the reticulocyte percentage to increase. The bone marrow has the capacity to increase up to 6 to 8 times its normal production capacity. So for a patient with anemia, we expect the reticulocyte count to be more. That's why we are calculating the corrected reticulocyte count. And then another factor comes into play. That is, usually reticulocytes are to mature into mature RBC takes around 3 days. It usually spends 2 days in the bone marrow, and in the peripheral blood it spends around 1 day. But when in case of anemia, increased precursors are released in the blood. That's why we have to take into the maturation time, we have to take into account. And using that, we calculate the reticulocyte production index. That is defined as using the corrected reticulocyte count, that is percentage reticulocytes into patient hematocrit by 45 divided by the maturation time in peripheral blood. That we are calculating based on hematocrit again. If the hematocrit is more than 40, we will take it as 1. That is the maturation time is normal. And if it is 30 to 40, we take it as 1.5. And for 20 to 30, we take it as 2, and less than 20, we take it as 2.5. If the reticulocyte production index is more than 2.5, that is not the reticulocyte percentage, the reticulocyte production index is more than 2.5, then that means that the marrow has adequately responded to the anemia. If the reticulocyte percentage is less than 2, then the bone marrow is not responding to anemia properly. There is some hypoproduction. 2 to 2.5 is a gray area, and more sensitive or more specific than reticulocyte production index is the absolute reticulocyte count. That we are calculating by percentage of reticulocyte into RBC count. RBC count we all know, and using that and into percentage of reticulocyte count, we are calculating the absolute reticulocyte count. The normal value is 25 to 75. If a patient with anemia has a value less than 100, it indicates an inappropriately low erythrocytic response. Okay, after we see this, we will take this pathway. That is, there is no other lineage abnormality. Then we are coming to a reticulocyte response. And then we will go into the causes, into the approach for each. First, microcytic anemias. Microcytic anemias, to remember them easily, they are associated with some defect in hemoglobin synthesis. That is, maybe some mineral deficiency or hemoglobinopathy as such. Disorders of iron metabolism, maybe iron deficiency anemia or anemia of chronic disease. Iron deficiency anemia, the iron is deficient in the blood. In anemia of chronic disease, iron is surplus, but the RBC is not able to utilize them. Coming to hemoglobin synthesis, hemoglobinopathies, alpha and beta thalassemia, hemoglobin E and hemoglobin C syndromes. Sideroblastic anemia can cause both microcytic and macrocytic. Sideroblastic anemia is due to defect in heme synthesis. It can be hereditary, it can be acquired due to alcohol, hepatitis C, and so on. And it can be due to malignancies. Lead intoxication usually causes microcytic, but it can cause macrocytic. Same goes for copper also. As we see, the usual central pillar should be less than half to 1/2 to 1/3 of the whole RBC diameter. It is more here. As we say, the most common cause of anemia is iron deficiency in developing countries, and in developed countries, it is anemia of chronic disease. Chronic disease includes any inflammatory conditions, any malignancy, or any infection. So differentiating between them both is key. Coming on to the parameters, which this is the iron study which we do. We measure serum iron, total iron binding capacity, percentage saturation, that is transference saturation, and ferritin. Serum iron is very labile actually. In normal persons, it shows diurnal variation. It is more in the morning and less at night. And even measured within minutes to hours, the researchers are showing that serum iron values differ by 10 to 40%. So serum ions are not reliable. Ferritin can be used. In iron deficiency anemia, ferritin will be low, as we all know. In inflammation, ferritin will be high. But the caveat is, if an iron deficiency patient, iron deficiency iron deficient person comes with an infection. Ferritin being an acute phase reactant will flare up. Ferritin will be in the thousands. But how to differentiate if it is iron deficiency or inflammation? There comes in TABC. TABC is total iron binding capacity. What binds iron? That is transferrin. So total by iron binding capacity is a surrogate marker of serum transferrin. Serum transferrin in iron deficient anemia will be high because the iron stores are very low. Iron stores being low, it will stimulate more amount of transferrin. But in case of inflammation, the iron stores are adequate. So the TABC will in fact be less. So TABC is actually more preferable than ferritin to differentiate between iron deficiency and inflammation, particularly in a hospital setting. And in sideroblastic anemia, everything will be normal because this is a defect in heme synthesis, not related to iron. To differentiate between thalassemia and iron deficiency, we have several indices. As I already said, hemoglobin will be low in thalassemia, but the RBC will be normal. This is given as Menzer index. That is MCV divided by RBC count. If it is more than 14, it is iron deficiency anemia. If it is less than 12, it is thalassemia. That is the denominator will be more in thalassemia. Hence, the fraction will come below less than 12. 12 to 14 is indeterminate. Coming on to iron deficiency anemia, as we all know, the iron in food is in the form of heme and non-heme iron. Heme iron requires a different transporter. It doesn't need any enzyme as such, and heme iron is more efficiently absorbed than non-heme iron. Non-heme iron is in the ferric form. It has to be reduced to the ferrous form by cytochrome B oxidase, and it is carried inside by divalent metal transporter 1. This is not specific only to iron. And in the mucosa it is stored as ferritin, and it again comes out as ferrous, and it has to be converted to ferric by ferroportin. Ferroportin is inhibited by hepcidin. This forms the basis for anemia of chronic disease. Because in anemia of chronic disease, because of increased interleukin production like IL-6, a liver is stimulated to produce more hepcidin. And hepcidin inhibits ferroportin 1, not only in the intestinal mucosa cells, but also in reticulocyte, but also in reticuloendothelial system also. That's why in fact, in spite of being the stores being normal, the RBC, the erythroid precursors are not able to utilize the iron. The causes of iron deficiency anemia can be because of decreased oral intake, or it can be a chronic blood loss, which is usually gastrointestinal. An iron deficiency anemia in a postmenopausal female or in a male more than 40 years should be investigated properly. It can be due to decreased iron absorption, or it can be due to increased demand also. And then coming on to thalassemia. Thalassemia has a characteristic facies which includes a flat mid-face, thin upper lip, and a smooth philtrum, small forehead. And on X-ray, we can see the crooked appearance because of hyperplastic bone marrow. To diagnose thalassemia, we use hemoglobin electrophoresis. Coming into the approach, to summarize the approach, how to approach a patient with microcytic anemia, first we have to look at the reticulocyte count. Usually it will be low, as we already saw. It can be increased in some other miscellaneous conditions also. If the reticulocyte count is low, we have to look at iron, TABC, and ferritin. In iron deficient anemia, ferritin will be low, TABC will be high, and iron will be low. In case of anemia of chronic disease, iron will be low, TABC will be low, and ferritin will be normal or high. Then we have to look at CRP, ESR, and other stuff. And if all three are normal, then we should look at electrophoresis to look for hemoglobinopathies. And if the serum iron is high, ferritin is high, and TABC is normal, then we should examine bone marrow with iron stains to look for sideroblastic anemia. Then coming on to macrocytic anemia, macrocytic anemias. Macrocytic anemias can be megaloblastic or it can be non-megaloblastic. Megaloblastic anemias, in the sense, what defines megaloblastic anemia is hypersegmented neutrophils and macroovulocytes. As we see, there are more than 5 lobes in this neutrophil. And here the RBCs are not spherical; they are oval and they are larger in size. High segmented neutrophils and macro-ovulocytes are the characteristic which, if they are present in the peripheral smear, then we name it as megaloblastic anemia. Not all patients having an MCV more than 100 are megaloblastic, but usually, if the MCV is more than 115 or 120, it is most likely due to vitamin B12 or folate deficiency. The causes, coming to the causes, before that, just the physiology of vitamin B12 absorption. Vitamin B12 is bound to binding proteins in the diet. By the activation of gastric acid, the vitamin B12 is separated and is in turn bound to haptocorrin secreted by salivary fluid. And this is in turn digested by proteases secreted by pancreas, and it binds to the intrinsic factor which is secreted by gastric parietal cells. And this intrinsic factor and B12 complex is taken on by intrinsic factor receptor, Cubilin, into the bloodstream where it is transported with the help of transcobalamin 2. Cubilin receptor mutations can cause a rare form of hereditary vitamin B12 deficiency called Imerslund-Grace-Buck syndrome. Cubilin is also present in the renal epithelial cells, hence the patient also has proteinuria. I said in microcytic anemia, the basic defect is a defect in hemoglobin synthesis. Coming on the megaloblastic anemia, the basic defect is nuclear maturation. Because the nucleus is not maturing, the cells are not able to divide, and the cytoplasm and hemoglobin gets accumulated, and the cells become larger in size. So anything to do with nucleus maturation causes the cell size to increase. The causes are vitamin B12 deficiency, which might be due to a dietary deficiency or lack of intrinsic factor in achlorhydria, pernicious anemia, and other gastrectomy patients. Ingestion of caustic materials, which in turn causes damage to the gastric mucosa. And it can be due to ileal resection because vitamin B12 is absorbed in the ileum, or it can be due to small bowel bacterial overgrowth, in which case the bacteria use the vitamin B12 for their growth. And diphyllobothrium latem can also cause vitamin B12 deficiency. As I said, Imerslund-Grace-Buck syndrome is a rare cause. Some drugs can cause vitamin B12 deficiency. That is the drugs which interfere with DNA synthesis. For example, methotrexate, 6-mercaptopurine, cyclophosphamide, antiretroviral drugs, and other things. Coming on to folate deficiency can again be due to dietary causes or increased requirement, which is in pregnancy and chronic hemorrhagic anemia. Combined folate and vitamin B12 deficiency can occur in tropical sprue and gluten-sensitive enteropathy. Other rare causes include orotic aciduria, which is a defect in inherited causes include orotic aciduria, which is a defect in purine synthesis, Lesch-Nyhan syndrome, and thiamine responsive megaloblastic anemia, which is a defect in thiamine transporter protein. So if you give thiamine, this megaloblastic anemia will resolve. Transcobalamin 2 deficiency and homocystinuria and methylmalonic aciduria can also occur. As I said, not all macrocytes are megaloblasts. Usually, non-megaloblastic macrocytic anemias have an MCV between 100 to 110. The causes can be hemorrhagic anemia, in which the reticulocyte, because of its high size, will derange the MCV into the higher amount. Alcoholism can cause macrocytic anemia. In fact, high MCV is used as a screening tool for alcoholism. After abstinence, it might take up to 2 to 4 months for the MCV to become normal. In liver disease and acquired sideroblastic anemia and other causes, it can be non-megaloblastic macrocytic anemia. Congenital dyserythropoietic anemia is a rare cause of non-megaloblastic macrocytic anemia. Spurious macrocytosis can occur in inflammation and paraproteinemia because the high amounts of protein and inflammatory cells can interfere with the hematogenesis detection. And then summarizing the approach, we should first, for a patient with a high MCV more than 100, we should look at the peripheral smear, as I said, to look for hypersegmented neutrophils or macroovulocytes. If they are not present, they are not megaloblastic anemia. Then we should look at reticulocytosis. If it is increased, it is due to hemorrhage or hemolysis. If it is normal or decreased, we should consider alcohol toxicity, hypothyroidism, and liver disease. If all the three histories are negative, then we can go in for bone marrow examination to detect the rare causes. If the peripheral smear has hypersegmented neutrophils and macroocytes, then it is megaloblastic anemia, and we should test for serum B12 and folate levels. Here, another caveat is that serum folate level is very labile. It will fluctuate within minutes to hours after an intake of high folate containing food or low folate containing food. So, RBC folate levels are more sensitive. In the sense, RBC folate levels represent the storage form. It lasts for till the lifespan of RBC from 100 to 120 days. If there is a vitamin B12 deficiency, then we should identify the cause. Schilling test, which is rarely used now. If the Schilling test corrects with the intrinsic factor, it is due to an intrinsic factor anomaly, which is usually pernicious anemia. Pernicious anemia, the age group is onset is usually 70 to 80 years and slightly more common in women. And if it doesn't correct with intrinsic factor, then we have to look at the ileal disease, small bowel bacterial overgrowth, or a drug-induced malabsorption. If there is a folate deficiency, then we should look into the causes, as mentioned earlier. If there is no deficiency, then we should look for inherited causes and drugs. Another caveat is we might see a patient with B12 deficiency who might be having normal B12 levels. That is a functional B12 deficiency. In that case, we have to measure serum homocysteine and methylmalonic levels. The patient will have serum hyperhomocysteinemia and methylmalonic aciduria. And coming to the approach with normocytic anemia, it's very rare to see in our setting. As usual, we should look at the reticulocyte count. If it is increased, then we should look for hemolysis or hemorrhage. If it is decreased, then we should look for anemia of chronic disease. Anemia of chronic disease starts as normocytic normochromic, especially anemia of chronic disease due to CKD. And we should look at serum iron. Early iron deficiency and anemia of chronic disease can also happen. If both are negative, we have to go in for bone marrow to rule out other rare causes. This is the same. I mentioned the congenital dyserythropoietic porphyria and macrocytic. There I have told about a type 1 and 3. Type 2 causes normocytic anemia. Type 2 is the most common one. And then coming on to the major junk, that is hemolytic anemia. Hemolytic anemia is a topic in as such because it is very vast. I will just try to touch upon the basics alone. Classification of hemolytic anemia can be into inherited acquired causes, or intravascular or extravascular, or intracorpuscular or extracorpuscular. Based on the functional and the clinical perspective, intracorpuscular, extracorpuscular, and intravascular and extravascular seem to be more significant. Coming on to inherited causes, it can be due to an abnormality in the RBC membrane cytoskeleton itself, or it can be due to a problem in the metabolic pathway, or it may be due to an hemoglobinopathy. It can be qualitative as in sickle cell anemia, or quantitative as in thalassemia. Coming on to acquired causes, it can be immune mediated or non-immune mediated. And acute causes include intravascular causes most commonly, like sepsis. Chronic includes extravascular causes. As I already said, a patient with the hereditary spherocytosis may be so very well compensated that he might not even present with any symptoms. Compensated as hereditary spherocytosis. Compensated with acute exacerbation classically occurs in PNH, that is paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. Decompensated hemolysis occurs in drugs, infections, and autoimmune hemolytic anemia. This is the basic model of RBC structure. It has band 3 proteins and in the as transmembrane protein, and this is ankyrin, spectrin, and other stuff. So coming on to the laboratory signs of hemolysis, it is very difficult to differentiate between intravascular and extravascular. The only sign that goes in favor of extravascular is splenomegaly and acholytic jaundice. Acholytic in the sense hemolytic jaundice. Hemolytic jaundice can also occur in intravascular also, very rarely. And likewise, intravascular characteristic is hemoglobinuria and hemosideриnuria in chronic cases. LDH and haptoglobin can both rise and fall with intravascular and extravascular, but the severity is more with intravascular. as I already said, we can classify hemolysis as acquired and inherited. Acquired is again divided into immunohemolytic, which can be autoimmune, which can be due to transfusion of incompatible blood, or it can be, in the case of newborn, it can be hemolytic disease of newborn. Um, and trauma and traumatic hemolytic anemia can occur in HUS, TTP, DIC, prosthetic valves, etc. Infection causing hemolysis most commonly is malaria, Clostridia, and babesiosis. Other rare causes include a PNH. In liver disease, spursal anemia can cause hemolysis. Snake venom is a rare cause of hemolysis. Coming to inherited causes, RBC membrane abnormalities like spirocytosis, elliptocytosis, stomacytosis, and xerocytosis can cause hemolysis. RBC enzyme disorders include G6PD, which is the most common enzyme defect in the whole world, and the pyruvate kinase and other rare enzyme deficiencies. Hemoglobin disorders, as I said, it can be qualitative like sickle cell, or it can be quantitative like thalassemia. Coming on to immune hemolytic anemias. Immune hemolytic anemias, as we all know, we detected by direct Coombs test. But we should, in fact, but we should not stop there as such. We should proceed into the type of autoimmune hemolytic anemias. As we all know, it can be warm or cold. Cold autoimmune hemolytic anemia is mostly due to secondary infections, viral infections such as EBV, mycoplasma, etc. But but it can be a marker of underlying plasma cell disorder also. Likewise, warm autoimmune hemolytic anemia is usually idiopathic, but it can be due to underlying connective tissue disease or underlying malignancy also. Warm in the sense, warm autoimmune hemolytic anemia is IgG, which is more active at 37 degrees Celsius. Cold is IgM, which agglutinates at 4 degrees Celsius. This is what I said. We should, for any case of hemolysis in the sense with the laboratory features, that is unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, increased LDH, and etc. We should first look into the direct Coombs test. If the direct Coombs test is positive, we usually measure, our labs don't give which we are using, whether the antibody or the complement. We should actually test for both the IgG as well as the complement. If the IgG is positive and the complement is negative, it goes in favor of warm hemolytic anemia. It goes in favor of warm hemolytic anemia. And if the IgG is negative and complement direct Coombs test is positive, it goes in favor of cold hemolytic anemia. Coming on to non-immune mediated hemolytic anemias, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria is a disease entity by itself. It can present as aplastic anemia. It can present with thrombosis, characteristically abdominal and dermal cerebral vein thrombosis, or it can present with episodic hemoglobinuria also. Other rare causes include paroxysmal cold hemoglobinuria, usually in children, or it can occur with falciparum and other toxic chemicals. Then summarizing as such, if a patient comes with anemia, we should first ask the history and we should examine the patient, and then going into the laboratory. The main thing is reticulocyte count. If the reticulocyte count is, the reticulocyte production index is less than 2.5, we should look into the red cell morphology. If it is normocytic normochromic, then it is due to hyperproliferative disorder, which might be due to some marrow damage like infiltration, fibrosis, aplasia, or early stages of iron deficiency anemia. It can also be due to inflammation, metabolic disease, or renal disease. If the red cell morphology is microcytic or macrocytic, then it's a maturation disorder. Cytoplasmic defects cause microcytic anemias, and nuclear defects cause macrocytic anemias. If the index is more than 2.5, it is due to hemolysis or hemorrhage, which can be due to intravascular or metabolic defect or membrane abnormality. It can be an hemoglobinopathy, or it can be due to immune destruction, or it can be fragmentation hemolysis. These are my references. Thank you.
That was very good presentation. So basically, anemia, அப்படின்னு summarize பண்ணோம்னா, I'll just summarize. So you said anemia is 13 less than 12 in pregnant women?
Less than 11.
Okay, so less than 11. I'll just 1 minute. So share பண்ணோம்னா இதுதான் actually. So approach சொல்லணும்னா basically when you see a case of anemia, the first thing that you have to look, next thing that you have to look into is the reticulocyte count. So if you have a reticulocyte count, the main purpose of seeing a reticulocyte count is problem is in the bone marrow or outside the bone marrow. That is what you want to know. So first அதுக்கு முன்னாடி anemia வந்து வெறும் anemia தானா anemia associated with other cytopenias. If associated with other cytopenias, again the problem could be in the bone marrow. Or if not, only if it is an isolated anemia, then you have to look at the reticulocyte count. Then the reticulocyte count, if it is increased, then the problem is outside the bone marrow. If it is not so, then the problem is in the bone marrow. So then again, if it is increased, you have to look, there could be hemolytic or non-hemolytic anemia. So evidence of hemolysis irukkan paathuட்டு hemolytic anemia adukaprom if not so, then blood loss. So adukaprom வந்து the patient is having a reduced reticulocyte count, the problem is in the bone marrow. Then you have to look at the first only anemia associated with cytopenia அடுத்து reticulocyte count பார்க்கணும். reticulocyte count பார்த்ததுக்கு அப்புறம் பேஷண்ட்டுக்கு வந்து once hyperproliferative anemia அப்படி தெரிஞ்சதுக்கு அப்புறம் then you have to look at the red cell indices. So red cell indices கிடைச்சதுக்கு அப்புறம் அது என்ன டைப் ஆஃப் அனிமியா, நார்மோசைட்டிக்கா மைக்ரோசைட்டிக்கா அதுன்னு நம்ம இது பண்ணிடணும். ஸோ அதுக்கப்புறம் வந்து ஸோ அதை நம்ம கேர்ஃபை பண்ணிடணும். அதுக்கப்புறம் பேசிக்லி ஒரு மைக்ரோசைட்டிக், மேக்ரோசைட்டிக் அண்ட் நார்மோசைட்டிக். ஓகே, ஸோ மைக்ரோசைட்டிக் அப்படின்னா அதுக்கப்புறம் நீங்க தெரிஞ்சுக்க வேண்டியது மைக்ரோசைட்டிக்ல ஒரு 4 காசு தான். ஸோ டிசார்டர் அயன் டெஃபிஷியன்சி, குளோபின் டிசார்டர்ஸ், சிட்ரோபிளாஸ்டிக் அனிமியா. ஸோ இதுதான் பேசிக்லி. இந்த இதையும் நம்ம எப்படி பார்க்கலாம் அப்படின்னா, ஸோ அப்புறம் ஒன்று காசு இருக்கு. ஸோ இது வந்து சொல்லணும்னா அகெயின், ஸோ தென் இது எப்படி நம்ம சொல்லலாம் அப்படின்னா, ஃபர்ஸ்ட் இதை வந்து பேசிக்கா அதுக்கப்புறம் இதுக்கு ஹைப்போப்ரொலிஃபரேட்டிவ் அனிமியாஸ்ல மைக்ரோசைட்டிக் அனிமியா வந்ததுக்கு அப்புறம் ஃபர்ஸ்ட் திங் யூ ஹேவ் டு லுக் அட் இஸ் தி RDW. So if it associated with an increased RDW, it is iron deficiency. If it is normal, then it is thalassemia. So how do you confirm between these four? Then you have to confirm between these four. You have to do an iron study. So what is anemia of chronic disease? Anemia of chronic disease is basically anemia in the presence of a normal ferritin store. That is what the definition is, anemia of chronic disease. So because of increased hepcidin, the ferritin is there, but it is not being utilized. Anemia of chronic disease can be both microcytic hypochromic or normocytic normochromic. So anemia of chronic disease தான் anemia of CKD எல்லாமே வரும். Iron deficiency anemia everything will be low, so iron binding capacity and everything will be iron binding capacity will be increased. Okay, so first step anemia associated with other cytopenias, isolated anemia, வெறும் isolated anemia தெரிஞ்சதுக்கு அப்புறம் ரெட்டிகுலோசைட் கவுண்ட், ரெட்டிகுலோசைட் பார்த்ததுக்கு அப்புறம் ஹைப்போப்ரொலிஃபரேட்டிவ் அனிமியாவா நார்மோப்ரொலிஃபரேட்டிவ் அனிமியா, ஹைப்போப்ரொலிஃபரேட்டிவ் அனிமியான்னு தெரிஞ்சதுக்கு அப்புறம் you have to look at the RDW, sorry MCV to confirm microcytic, macrocytic or normocytic. Then MCV பார்த்ததுக்கு அப்புறம் then you have to look into the RDW, microcytic hypochromic தெரிஞ்சதுக்கு அப்புறம் you have to look at the RDW. RDWல iron deficiency broad thalassemia தெரியும். Then அதுக்கப்புறம் அதுல வந்து you have to confirm it with the iron study. So இதுதான் பேசிக்லி. ஸோ thalassemia எடுத்துக்கிட்டீங்கன்னா thalassemia is disorder of globin chain synthesis தான். So the rest will be almost will be normal. Okay, so iron studies will be mostly normal. So sideroblastic anemia can be again iron studies will be high. Anemia of chronic disease, as I said, iron deficiency anemia everything will be low. So இதுதான் பேசிக்லி. So iron deficiency anemia decrease serum iron, everything will be decreased, your iron binding capacity alone will be increased. So anemia of chronic disease ferritin everything will be either ferritin is increased and rest will be decreased. Okay, so thalassemia iron will be absolutely normal because the problem is in the globin chain. So sideroblastic anemia you will have increased serum iron and ferritin. இதெல்லாம் ஒரு லைன் ஞாபகம் வச்சுக்கணும்னா அப்படிதான் ஞாபகம் வச்சுக்கணும். ஓகேவா? ஸோ coming on to macrocytic anemia, the macrocytic anemia again the most common cause of macrocytic anemia is not your megaloblastic, it is non-megaloblastic anemia. Okay, so megaloblastic is B12, folate and other drugs causing B12 folate deficiency and the cirrhotic aciduria. So non-megaloblastic anemia, sort of this non-megaloblastic. So see, this is usually எப்படி megaloblastic non-megaloblastic simple சொல்லலாம் ஒரு சின்ன clinical points னா your severe B12 deficiency will more likely to cause pancytopenia first. Then your B12 deficiency will have B12 and folate deficiency will have macroveilocytes, whereas non-megaloblastic will have macrophages. Okay, wow. And a B12 folate deficiency will cause severe pancytopenia. Platelets usually will be around the range of 20,000, not less than that. Very, very rarely it can go below than that. So these are the peripheral smear, macroveilocytes and hypersegmented neutrophils. Okay. So non-megaloblastic anemia causes mukhya. So most commonly or chronic it is alcoholism, liver disorders, all your lipid disorders, dyslipidemia causing a membrane defect, which will cause alcoholism, hypothyroid, liver disease. My MDS will cause pancytopenia. That is different. So then comes your this. We have seen microcytic, macrocytic. Then you say normocytic, normophobic. So megaloblastic sulton. The if a gold standard for diagnosing B12 and folate is you are looking at the serum methylmalonic acid and homocysteine levels. Methylmalonic acid is increased, then it is B12, or homocysteine increase, it is folate. So that is the gold standard right now. So non-megaloblastic is told you the process. So normocytic, basically normocytic now overlapping to the anemia of chronic disease and hemolytic anemia. Blood loss. So this is how you broadly classify a reticulocyte count. If it is decreased, then it is decreased or normal. Actually, it should be increased in case of any anemia. That is what defines a normal bone marrow. So if it is decreased or not increased, then it is look at the iron. Then the serum chemistry is to rule out the anemia of liver, renal, and endocrine failure. Okay. So this is one thing. So hemolytic anemias. Next comes your hemolytic anemias. So hemolytic anemias you classify them as so acquired and inherited, as he has said everything, and don't want to go much into that. So simple inherited due to RBC membrane disorders, due to hemoglobin disorders, due to enzyme disorders. So broad எல்லாத்துக்கும் ஒரு மூணு கேட்டகரியை நாம வச்சுக்கிட்டீங்கன்னா எல்லாமே ஈஸியா இருக்கும். So membrane disorders is spherocytosis, erythrocytosis, stomatocytosis. Enzymes are G6PD and pyruvate kinase. Hemoglobin disorders are thalassemia, sickle cell anemia. So acquired immune and non-immune. Immune is autoimmune hemolytic anemias and transfusion reactions, hereditary hemolytic disease of newborn. This traumatic is your traumatic microangiopathies and TTP and HUS. Okay. Don't forget PNS and snake bite. Okay. So this is one thing. This is all different. So hemoglobinopathies on basis of product the polo. So that's what. So remember, so these are some of the morphological clues which help you in diagnosing what type of hemolytic anemia it is. So if you have a schistocyte, it is more likely. Remember schistocyte, it is microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, highly suggestive. Remember when you have bite cells and blister cells, highly suggestive G6PD deficiency. So bite cells and blister cells are very important. And sickle cells, nothing much to tell. So just remember, first thing you must look into is only anemia or other cytopenia. The next thing that you have to look into is associated with any if the associated reti count. Problem main thing in looking at the reti count is in the bone marrow or outside the bone marrow. So if it is not in the bone marrow, then outside it could be blood loss or hemolysis. So those are the two. So if it is in the bone marrow, then you have to look at the MCV, RDW, MCV, and microcytic. When microcytic, look at the reticulocyte count, MCV. Then microcytic, when it comes, you look at the RDW and confirm it with the iron study. Then if it is an ormocytic or a macrocytic, you know the causes. So basically B12 folate, that is how you approach. So that's it. That's it from my side. Anyone else? Hello. So anyone else?
இல்லண்ணா டவுட் எதுவும் இல்லைண்ணா.
Okay, thank you then.
Thank you.